Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and joining me today is Courtney McCarthy. Courtney is the CEO and founder of LOYOBO, a community for women who are sick of trying to be smaller, who are learning to love their bodies and feel strong through radical body acceptance, joyful movement, and food freedom. Courtney's mission as an ACE-certified fitness instructor and body image mindful eating coach is to show women how to write their own rules when it comes to fitness and health. She wants us to know this isn't about weight loss. This is about learning how to love your body and feel strong so you can take up more space in your life. Courtney, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really glad that you're here so we can have this conversation because, well, I think there's some confusion on some of the topics I'm going to ask you to clarify, but also I think so many of us need this conversation. So hopefully it'll be a good one.
Yeah.
I want to start by asking you, your tagline says, this is about learning how to love your body so you can take up more space. What does that mean to you? What do you mean take up more space? You mean physically? Yes, I take up a little extra space over here, but that's not what you mean. What do you mean?
Actually, I feel like it does kind of mean that a little bit, but in multiple ways. And also, what a great question to start with. For me, when I think of my mission, like, of course, it's deeply related to movement, and I love being a fitness instructor. But why I do what I do is so much more than that. And it comes from this place of feeling a inner rage, sadness when I think of all the time and money and energy that women spend missing out on our lives, missing out on being in the photographs, missing out on saying yes to the beach day, missing out on that promotion because we don't feel enough, we don't feel worthy, or because we're focused on how our body looks.
Yeah.
I have watched my mother live her entire adult life waiting for that when I game, that, oh, I'll wear that kind of clothing once I lose weight. I'll wear that kind of clothing, when I feel better about myself, when I have more money, when I have more time. And I want to help women do that now, do that in whatever body they're in, however it looks like, and to learn how to spend their time and energy chasing their dreams rather than obsessing about their weight or obsessing with how they look, because I feel like the world needs that. The world needs more women's voices and more women's presence in everything, in our communities, in our businesses, in our governments. So that's what I mean by taking up space, taking up both literal space by just allowing yourself to be in your body without worrying about making it smaller, but also to take up intellectual space and, presence and just be there.
God, I feel that so much for a couple of reasons. The pictures is one that I've really worked on because when I look back, I have grandkids now. When I look back, there's not a lot of pictures of me with my kids for all the same reasons you said about your mom. And I have lost a lot of weight, so I feel better in pictures, but I still struggle when I look at those pictures.
Yeah.
I had to take some headshots last week for work, and I was like doing that thing with all of them.
Yeah.
And I was like, I had to talk to myself and be like, stop it, girl. Like, this is, you're good. Pick a picture and go with it.
You deserve to be seen.
Yeah, but I think it's okay to acknowledge to people that doesn't just go away. We make the decision. And then we have to keep marching towards it. And it's going to keep reoccurring. But take the pictures anyway. Like now I tell myself, like anytime I'm with the grandkids and I can take pictures, I don't care what I look like because when I'm gone, and I will be gone before they're grown, and you know what I mean? At some point, hopefully I'll see them grow, but you know what I mean? At some point, I want them to have those memories captured in those pictures. And you can't if you hide. So that's a big one for me. And then I think also I felt what you said around, I think sometimes in our job, in our life, whatever, we feel big in our bodies. So we try to feel small. Like we don't want to sit at the corporate table and say something and make everybody look at you. I know for years, I didn't want to get up on stage and talk to clients or be in presentations, which I had to do sometimes. But I know now the thing that really made me nervous about that was my body size. And that's silly because I'm up there because I'm an expert at something and I'm talking about it. And that's what we need to kind of reinforce for ourselves. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I do think we need more of that sentiment.
Yeah. And I think, I want to acknowledge what you said too about it's sadly, it's not silly. It is really real that there is a lot of thin privilege. There is a lot of privilege that comes in our world when you are in a smaller body. So I want to just acknowledge that for you and for anyone listening, that like, there's a reason that we feel this way. There's a reason that we all feel that pressure. And I think what I hope is that, what we end up doing with ourselves is we diminish our worth. As you said, even with yourself, that you have this expertise, you have this value that you're able to bring to the table. And when we do that little self-comparison in our head and we weigh that, pardon the pun, against how our bodies look, we value, and society values for women, the way that our bodies looks so much more than the very long list that most of us have.
Yes.
As far as skills and talents and expertise and accomplishments and, experience. And I just want to change that conversation. So even, in your self-talk is saying, okay, I understand why I'm feeling this way. I understand why that pressure is there. And I want to consciously start to make that effort to not value that as much as I'm valuing the long list. Like even when you think about your grandkids, right? They're not going to look back and be like, oh, I miss Nana because she was 10 pounds lighter.
Yeah. Right.
I miss Nana because she was such a, on that diet and really had that willpower. They're going to want to see your energy and your presence in your life. And they're going to think about all those memories that they had with you. And just taking that moment to say like, no, that's, as you said, that's what matters more. That's where my value is, not in how my body looks.
I love that. And it made me think of, I interviewed a couple months back, and I'll put the link in the show notes, Tara DeLeon, and she is also a body acceptance. She's a fitness instructor. And one of the things that she said that I now remind myself all the time is that her body is the least interesting thing about her.
Yeah.
And I just loved that because it's a quick way to remind ourselves when we start going down that path, we can be like, wait a minute. Like, who cares? This is just a silly body that I'm in. Like, it doesn't really mean anything. So I think that's important. I want to ask, so you're out there doing this work and you're spreading these messages, which is fabulous, but society comes back at you and says, stop encouraging obesity.
Oh,
Stop,
yes.
Right? Stop saying it's okay for people to stay in bigger bodies and do what they want. Like, what do you say to that?
Oh, what a great question. And this is one of those things that I'm like, yes, let's talk about it. I get accused of that all the time on Instagram and the socials of the word that's often used is like promoting or glorifying obesity. And I think that that's really interesting because we do promote and glorify thin and small bodies. There's such a correlation and level of assumption that we make of smaller is always better, smaller is always more healthy, smaller is always more attractive. And in reality, it's just not the truth. When it comes to whether or not you can promote obesity, at the end of the day, I'm not promoting any particular body size. I'm promoting feeling worthy and enough in the body that you have. And so when we think about that, the body that we have, when we look at genetics and, the history of mankind, there's always been larger bodies. There's always been different genetics, and we always have had people who look differently from one another. And there's this narrative that's been pushed that being in a larger body is inherently bad. It's inherently unhealthy. There's no good that can come from that. And the reality is that the science says otherwise, that there is no inherent causation that being bigger automatically makes you more unhealthy. Someone like myself, for example, I'm in a larger body than I was when I first started this fitness career. but I also have healed my IBS symptoms. So I'm no longer in, extreme digestive pain all the time. I've healed my cystic acne. My period is the most regular it's ever been. And I feel really good. I feel good about myself. I feel like I'm able to show up in my life in a way that I never could in a smaller body. So that's kind of what I always say back, is that it's not about promoting a specific body type. It's about acknowledging and recognizing that these body types exist. So that shouldn't be a negative thing. Let's just let people be in the body in which they feel their best, and challenge that health has to look a certain way, because it truly doesn't.
And I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but it really did make me think about, with all the talk out there and all the media about the weight loss drugs that are now just everywhere. When you said genetics, a thought popped in my head about whether you're taking them or not. I don't care. I'm in the middle right now. I'm indecisive about what I think about them. But I think the point I want to say is that there is more acknowledgement, I think, coming out because of them, that there is a genetic thing, that there is a different wiring, if you will, of our brains. And I think that's a good thing. If that's a byproduct of everybody, having these conversations and this kind of blowing up, I think that in itself is a great byproduct, because I do think for a lot of people, they just look at a bigger body and say, man, they need to stop eating those cookies or whatever it is, right? You fill in the blank. We all know the things. It really just is not that easy. There really are just so many factors at play. And I think the conversation is changing a little bit. And do I think it's going to change overnight? Do I think next week everybody's going to be accepted as they are? Absolutely not. But I do think the conversation is changing, and that is great. That gives me hope that it will keep going in the right direction, and there'll be more acceptance of diversity, and not just body, everything as we go on. But give it time.
And especially when we think about that genetics piece, there's a lot of beauty in history that's lost when we pretend that it isn't there. I actually just ran a food challenge where one of the questions that I asked people was to explore their genetic footprint and to really appreciate almost kind of like why their body is the way that it is from a like familial, hereditary line.
Yeah.
And I think of someone like myself where like, especially on my mom's side, like this is what the women in my mom's family look like. Like I'm not any different than my mom and her mom. And
same.
Even one of my clients went back, found a photo of someone from like the early 1900s who looked exactly like her.
Wow.
And even we started like dissecting it, because my client loves knitting and loves all these like, creative pursuits. And here this photo was of her wearing a knitted shawl.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm like, how cool is that to think of, like, not only do you have this body link, but it's showing you that this trait that you have, this interest, this hobby that you have may actually be something that was gifted to you from so many generations back. And then you have this new appreciation for your body. Is like, your body isn't just your body. It's this like accumulation of all these histories and stories and people and experiences that are so much more than just you.
Yeah, I love that.
And I think then we have this cool, it's an interesting paradox, because I totally agree with the sentiment that like your body is the least interesting thing about you. And at the same time, our bodies are really friggin' cool.
Yeah, I agree.
And when we get to explore that history too, I feel like it just makes you appreciate it in a new way. And especially when we talk about diversity, right? There are so many cultures and ethnicities where being in a bigger body was very much valued.
Yeah.
Was very much seen as like the pinnacle of like desirability or, high status.
Strength.
So
yeah.
It hasn't always been the case. And I think and even when we talk about the science again, that's important to acknowledge, is that a lot of people operate from this place of truth, that like it's undeniable fact that, thin is better and thin is healthy. And in reality, like that hasn't been the case in human history. That hasn't been the case in all cultures, in all backgrounds. And it doesn't have to be the case now.
Yeah, I love that. I want to go back to something you said. You talked about having self-worth, your own journey. So you're in a bigger body. You said, I'm in a bigger body now than when I started this fitness journey, but you feel more confident you healed these things, you feel more confident. But I think for many of us, being in the bigger body does impact our self-worth. It does impact our confidence. What do you say to that? How did you flip that in your own life where you're showing up in a way that you feel really great about, but yet you're in a bigger body than you used to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's definitely something I always like to acknowledge that it didn't happen overnight.
None of this does.
It definitely was a process. And there's so many things that I could go into and talk about that contributed to my journey. I think the biggest one was starting to, as I said, kind of separate out and parse out this idea that thinner is better and thinner is more attractive. One of the ways that I did that was by following and making sure my feed was filled with a lot of different bodies, both, women in larger bodies, women of different colors, women of different abilities, and watching them live their lives and watching them have fun and make memories and do things that I want to do and wear things that I want to wear was really a powerful kind of exposure. And it combats the opposite kind of exposure that we often have to, typical mainstream media, where we've been taught that, we've been shown that most of the things that we want to do, the fashions that we want to wear, the relationships that we want to have, the, life accomplishments that we want are often only shown to us, especially when we think of TV, movies, magazines, of women in thinner bodies. And so having that exposure to different kinds of bodies really helps to normalize the fact that being in a bigger body doesn't have to be the way it's presented to us in media, right? Like this, almost comical, disgusting, lazy. When you're only exposed to that, of course, you're going to see that in yourself reflected back. So allow yourself to just be open to and start trying to consume images and exposure to different bodies who aren't falling into that, sad, disgusting trap, but just living their life, living the sort of life that you want. And that really helps to flip the narrative as well.
I really like that advice. And I just want to acknowledge that I did some research, of course, I always do. They know that. I watched some of the stuff on your Instagram feed and, there's lots of clips, guys, out there of the types of classes that you offer, the fitness classes and the instructors and the yoga and all that. And I will say, I want to give you credit because when I was watching some of them, I was like, man, she looks really confident in her body doing that. And these women, they're not like in a smaller body. No. They're in all kinds of bodies. Let me say it that way. Right. Yeah. But they're also in bodies that you wouldn't traditionally expect to see as confidently doing some of the things that they're doing. And when they're doing,
especially in fitness,
that's what I mean. Like they're doing fun stuff. There was they're jiggling on purpose and they're doing, it was really fun to watch. And it was really a kind of an aha moment of that's it. That's what you're trying to exemplify and make people feel like they can show up that way too. So I want to give you kudos for that and just, acknowledge that it's out there and folks, you can take a look at it obviously as well. And I know you offer, right? Part of your thing, we said it, is a community which people can join, but you also put a lot of content out there that's free, I'll say. So if they want to get a glimpse of that, maybe they can't afford to get into the community because I'm all about making sure that things are accessible to people.
Yes.
They can still get little bits and pieces of that stuff by just checking out what you put out on Instagram. So worth saying that.
Well, I'm glad. Thank you so much for acknowledging that because it's done very intentionally from as soon as I kind of launched my business. One of our guiding principles has been no Photoshop.
I love that.
And using real women. So a lot of the photos that you'll see or the videos that you'll see are either our members or our instructors or, most often myself. And it's really important to see that representation. So I'm glad that you found that as well.
I did. The thing people will hear me like, I don't want to see my rolls show in that picture, right? I use that word. You see some rolls in some of these videos and it's okay. They're moving and having a great time. I just loved it. I loved it. So yeah, kudos to you.
Yeah. Let the rolls be free.
The rolls be free. So I want to talk about fitness for a minute because you are very clear that people's path to fitness and what they choose and what they get comfortable doing really should be separate from weight loss goals. Why is that so important?
So at the very heart of it, it's about the science and understanding how our brains and our bodies work. When we are intentionally pursuing weight loss, we're really setting ourselves up for failure. And I'm sure that many of your listeners can attest in their own experiences where you have that. We hear about like the roller coaster up and down yo-yo dieting, but many of us have that relationship with fitness as well, where, we decide, okay, Monday, I'm starting this program, and we go, all out for a couple of days, and we then feel the motivation wane, and we end up missing a day here or a day there. And all of a sudden it's been a couple of weeks and we're no longer moving our bodies. And because the narrative that exists in the fitness industry is basically like, you can do this. It's just about hard work. It's just about, willpower and determination. We end up really blaming ourselves. And as soon as we step into that blame, self-shame, putting ourselves down, that only does one thing, and that demotivates us.
Yeah. Yeah.
It keeps us stuck in the cycle of like, okay, then we wait until we feel badly about ourselves to then, okay, say I've reached the bottom. I got to do something. And we start that program again.
Yeah.
And so what I'm really looking to create in my community and for women is long-term sustainability. And when we think of long-term sustainability, we are very hedonistic, pleasure-oriented creatures. So the more that you're able to understand your body, the more that you're able to listen to what your body needs so that you can make movement. And there's a reason I'll talk about after that I often use the term movement instead of fitness or exercise, that the more that we can associate movement with pleasure, with things that feel good in our bodies, or really intentional movement where we're doing it for a purpose that's to show ourselves love, that's to take care of ourselves, to give ourselves something that we need, the more that we're able to have that just be part of our routine, have it just be part of our life, and have it adapt to life challenges. If it doesn't have to look a certain way, if it doesn't have to feel a certain way, if we just know that it's something that is part of what makes us feel good, then it's so much more likely that we're going to get back to it after days off, that we're going to get back to it or have it be part of, life's challenges and those hard times. And when we think of that as like, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
So it's just part of life. There's no end goal. There's no end destination. So that's really why I am all about separating it from the weight loss, because when we focus on weight loss, you're not going to get the results that you want. You're not going to feel the way that you want to feel. And it's going to be so much harder. So I want to make it easier. I want to make it more stress-free. And I want to help women build that consistent movement routine that feels easy to them.
So on that same line of thinking, I think you're an advocate of 5-minute intervals of exercise. And,
Yep.
Some people kind of poo-poo that, you need at least 30 minutes.
Many people poo-poo
right?
that.
You need at least 30 minutes, or you need to work up a sweat, or whatever you fill in the blank. And you say to that, what?
I mean, it depends on how explicit you want me to be.
You say BS.
Especially because, what is that kind of shame or standard accomplishing? Because in reality, it's putting up we just talked about accessibility. It's putting up this huge barrier that's saying that exercise only has value if it looks a certain way, if it meets a certain set of criteria. And for most of us, especially when we're talking about, people who are just getting back into fitness, people who are intimidated by gyms, people who don't feel good in their bodies, who have a lot of this, the shame and the insecurities and the negative self-worth, asking us to go from 0 to 100, both not only isn't helpful, but it's also not realistic. And what I love about 5-minute workouts is that it opens that door. It opens that door. And for many of my clients, what they end up saying is, it's easy to convince myself, even on my worst days, to do 5 minutes of something, right? 5 minutes of dancing, 5 minutes of breathing, 5 minutes of stretching, 5 minutes of strength work. Like that's the easy yes. And then once I start, I feel those benefits.
Yeah.
I feel that mood shift. And very often they're like 5 minutes will end up being like, well, that was great. I can do another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if you don't, it's okay, but it's about opening that door. It's about making it possible and getting that hell yes, because then we start the positive feedback loop. The
Yeah.
positive, I don't know what the opposite term of roller coaster or yo-yo is, but the positive kind of snowball effect where you do the 5 minutes, you feel successful, that
Yeah.
makes you want to do it again.
Yeah. You're cultivating the practice.
Exactly. And you're cultivating that association, that mind muscle memory and connection that this equals good feelings.
Mm,
And again, we're hedonistic. So your body and your mind are going to be like, I want that good feeling
yeah.
again.
So almost the opposite question, but what do you say to people, we're getting up on the beginning of the year and people tend to go all in. People tend to,
Yep.
everybody has these goals at the beginning of the year and we all set them. And, sometimes, a lot of times, people include a fitness goal in there. And I think there's a statistic out there about how gyms go crazy in the new year with memberships, etc.
Yes.
But then they fall off quickly. So what do you say to people as they're thinking about their New Year's resolutions or their New Year's goals, knowing that you want to promote fitness, but yet knowing that people that, give these huge goals of trying to go all in, it's likely not going to happen. So what advice do you give to people?
As much as possible, we want to look for those. The expression that I often use are the hell yes goals. The goals that when you look at and you think of, again, the worst days, the hardest days, the busy days, the stressful days, what do you think will still be a hell yes? Like, absolutely, I can do that. No brainer. Like, brushing your teeth, having a glass of water, getting up and showering, those kind of levels. And aim for those to start. Aim for those kind of goals and let yourself be really successful in those and build the habits and the foundation that will set you up for success. Part of this is really, again, it comes down to accepting the way that our bodies and our brains work. And the fitness industry and the diet industry really sets us up to be in conflict with those. That's where it comes down. We're supposed to have the willpower. We're supposed to dominate and have that self-control. And it sets us up to be in opposition with our bodies. And I'm trying to flip that script and say, okay, let's set goals that work with the way that our bodies function. Set goals that work with the way that our psychology works rather than fighting against it. And especially, I'm sure we have a lot of moms listening. You know how it is, right? When you're dealing with a toddler or a young child, if you're trying to get them to eat the vegetables, yelling at them and, fighting with them to eat the vegetables often doesn't make it easier for them to eat the vegetables. Yeah. But when we seek out, for example, that feeling of play, when we make it a game, when we make it fun, when we help to, try to understand them on their level, then we often see those big changes that we're looking to see. So we can take the same approach with ourselves of like, can we make it fun? Can we make it a game? Can we find those hell yes
I like that
goals so that we set ourselves up for success?
I like that. Hell yes. I want to sort of flip it a little bit when we talk about accepting our body as it is and feeling confident in that and the whole topic of, not promoting obesity. I want to tie it into the nutrition factor. So if you get to the point where you love your body, your bigger body, what does that look like from a nutrition standpoint? Because again, I want to make sure we're not getting accused of promoting, eat whatever you want, stuff, whatever. There's a balance, of course. So what does nutrition look like when you accept your body? You accept that this isn't all about weight loss. This is, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be okay in my body. Then what does nutrition look like?
That's a great question. So I advocate for a mindful approach to eating. And what that means is that we're really letting our bodies be the guide. So eating when we're hungry, stopping when we're full, listening to the things that our bodies crave or are asking for, listening to the things that don't make our bodies feel good or make us feel like crap. And part of the mindful eating approach is gentle nutrition. And what gentle nutrition means is that nutrition is part of listening to our bodies. And there's the empowerment of allowing yourself to almost pick and choose the nutritional advice that works best for you and your body. So to come back to the accessibility example, how people tout all these like superfoods that, and like, the high cost, organic, pesticide free, all these like
Yes.
fancy terms. If that doesn't work for you in your life where you are right now, or it's not feasible, or let's say, for example, that someone like myself, there are certain, let's say, like on that list of like the top 10 touted healthy things that you're supposed to eat, like kale. I'll give an example. Kale does not make me feel good. As somebody who has a history of IBS, there are some things my body just doesn't digest well. So I'm going to listen and say, okay, rather than forcing myself to eat kale, I'm going to seek out other ways that I can get nutrition that feel good for my body. So it's about thinking of food as an ally, thinking of food as a way to show your body love, as a way to, even when we think about that, coming back to that topic of taking up space, I often talk with my clients about food being fuel in order for me to go out and do all the things that I want to do. And it's really taking that really wide lens look at life once again and saying, okay, a single meal, a single snack, a single drink will not make or break my health, but it's about overall giving myself permission to see what food, the role that food has in my life. So it's part of, emotional eating is normal. It's part of the experience of joy. It's part of our social occasions. It's also part of meeting our nutritional needs. And all of those things can be true. And it's about listening to your body and doing what feels good, the best that you can, moment by moment, day by day.
Yeah. I love the reminder about listening when things don't make you feel good. When you know that if you eat too much XYZ, how it's going to feel for you the next day or that night or whatever the situation.
Or sometimes when you eat too little XYZ.
Yeah. Valid. But I think we tend to ignore that. So when you learn to tune into that, it really does guide you with making better decisions overall. And I also think it's important, to your point, one meal, one snack, one this, one that, it's not going to do anything really in the big picture. I think it's okay to give yourself permission. If you want the cupcake, eat the cupcake. If you want the cookie, eat the cookie, because we also know that for many of us, if we don't, that's all we're going to think about for 2 days. And we're going to end up eating five cookies or 5 cupcakes or whatever it is. So,
yeah, and that's a part of what we talked about, right? As far as, instead of fighting against the way that your mind and your body works, of accepting it. So for example, from a psychology perspective, as soon as we make foods forbidden, as soon as we encounter food scarcity where things aren't allowed, that instantly triggers, for good reason, for good evolutionary reason, when things were scarce, our bodies are supposed to really want those things. Yeah. So instead of making it scarce, instead of making it forbidden, that's just going to trigger that food obsession and increase those cravings more, versus something called food habitualization, which is where you have access to food. Like, nobody often craves or feels that way, to go back to my example about kale, because you always know that kale's there. You let yourself have kale if you want it. It's not forbidden. So it's kind of like boring. It's kind of like not exciting. And the same thing can happen with our super exciting, forbidden foods. The more that we allow ourselves to eat them, the more that you might see a big part of why it tastes so good, or why we want it so much, is because we're doing that forbidden, food dance. Yeah. Versus, as soon as I've had so many clients tell me that thing that they were always craving. I had one client who loved Taco Bell. That was like her thing. She couldn't stop eating Taco Bell. She couldn't figure out why. And as soon as I said to her, okay, I want you to try for like a short period of time, anytime you have Taco Bell, anytime you want Taco Bell, I want you to give yourself permission to eat it and just see what happens. And very quickly, she's like, she noticed, okay, I don't feel great afterwards. And she's like, it's actually not as good as I thought it was. Yeah. But it was that dance, right? Of like trying to resist it and then giving in and then feeling like crap. And as soon as we took all that kind of drama, so to speak, out of it, she was able to relax and see things more clearly. And now she knows, okay, if I have a craving for Taco Bell, if that's something I want, she goes and gets it. But that happens much more rarely because
she can.
It's allowed. Yeah. It's not forbidden because she can. Exactly.
I love that. I've experienced that myself. I was just sitting here thinking about the pantry when you were talking about that, because Anybody that listens regularly knows I say chips and ice cream. Those were my things, right?
Love it.
There's probably 5 bags of chips in my pantry. My grandkids are always here, whatever. My husband's a food junkie and he's thin. But there's probably like 5 bags of chips in that pantry that's been sitting there for a couple of weeks. I mean, it's just, they're there. If I want them, I'll go have some, but it's not something I'm thinking about all the time.
It's normal.
Yeah, it's normal to just have them there. And there's, a big bag of all the little miniature candies and stuff. It's just, I think once you get to the point where you can have them whenever you want to have them, it's not that big of a deal. Now, listen, we all know I still have things to work on. We all do, but I'm just saying that's progression. Acknowledge the progression, people. Acknowledge the progression.
Yes, it's important. Yes. Celebrate the progression too.
Celebrate, not just acknowledge. That's a great point. So as we start to wrap up, I always like to ask one last question around what is the best piece of advice that you've ever gotten? What can you share with us what the best piece of advice that you've gotten is?
I mean, I'm going to take this to a very specific time in my life where the best advice I ever got was to go for my fitness career. I was never someone who considered myself an athlete or, I didn't follow the typical fitness trajectory where I, played sports in school and then went to university for kinesiology or anything like that. It was by, and I love how you said it was by another fitness instructor who looked like me, had a bigger body, who helped me to fall in love with fitness. And she was the one that said, go pursue it. You can do this. So that's personally some of the best advice that I ever have gotten. But another one is to give yourself permission to fail, to fail often, to fail quickly, to fail plentifully. And that has really helped to reframe how I think of failure in my life, and both when it comes to fitness and health and nutrition. One of the biggest things that's helped me to be seen is to just let myself do it, whether it's good or not.
Yeah. I was going to add that one that goes right with those two that I love is allowing yourself to be a beginner, be a novice, because I think especially at middle-aged women, I think we're used to doing all the things and, having mastered all the things. I think it's really hard for us to start doing something that we think we're going to suck at, right? Mm-hmm. And it's okay. Yeah. It's okay. Suck at it. Learn it.
It can be fun.
It can be fun.
I actually I did a post fairly recently of, we had an instructor come in who I adore, but she teaches Booty yoga. And if you've never done Booty yoga, it is like this cool mix of like dance, and it feels a little bit like stripper-esque. It's so fun, but with yoga, but it's hard. And I took a little video of myself being like, I am not good at this, but I am having so much fun at it.
I love that. That's the point, is to find the things that are fun, because you'll do them more. So fantastic.
And I don't have to, it's not my goal to be an expert at booty yoga. It was my goal to have fun in that moment.
Yeah, I love that. So. What a good message. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me so much. This has been a great conversation. Where can people find you the most? Is it Instagram? Yeah.
It is Instagram. I'm an Instagram millennial.
Well, we'll put your links out there for everybody. And I definitely will recommend that people go check you out and check out the work that you're putting out in the world, the messages you're putting out in the world. It's great stuff. So thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. And I'd love to offer your listeners, if they want to take that first step and get started, I have a free 5-day confidence course that's about doing a lot of this work of the self-talk and changing your story around your body and health and nutrition. And it's loyobofit.com/free5.
Love that. We'll put the link out there too, you guys, in case you're driving or doing something else, but we'll put it in the show notes. But have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.